You'll say we've got nothing in common, no common ground to start from, and we're falling apart.
This is an attempt to find out areas that in which there may be policy agreement, but without actually trying to force compromise or force someone to bend too far. We're just looking at areas that might that might intersect. Think of Venn diagrams where they kind of cross over. So let's start with the big picture. We're talking tonight about the proper role of government in the economy. I think everybody knows that government in the economy, there will always be a role for government in the economy, and that's been debated for probably more than the 224 years of the Constitution. USA Today Gallup poll today indicated that about 1 in 5 Americans feel that government has too big a role, and 1 in 5 feel as though government should do more. So those are the extremes, and then in the middle is maybe the vast majority of people who do see a common ground. So with that, just thinking of the proper role of government in the economy, let's move to our panelists and let's talk a little bit about it and at a kind of a big picture way. We'll drill down later, and Kraft will help us with that. But let's just kind of get the top line of where government should play in the economy.
The role has 3 aspects to it. First, defining the rules of the game. Everyone needs to understand what the laws and regulations are so that everyone can play by the same rules. And I think, second, providing a minimum level of support for the most neediest in our society, I think. And then third, and I think most relevant to the recent period, I think it's key that government can fill the breach, that there are times when our economy isn't functioning properly, isn't functioning well. There aren't many times, but there are, in our historical experience, a few.
I'm a libertarian. I do believe in very limited government. I think that the role of the government in the economy should be really as small as possible. I think Mark and I agree on a lot when it comes to economics. I think the one area where we probably fundamentally disagree is on the role of government in an economic crisis like we've had over the last couple of years. We've spent somewhere in the neighborhood, when you add up all of these programs that we have had, the $800 billion stimulus plan, the bailout of the auto companies, the Cash for Clunkers program, the $300 billion or so we've spent on mortgage modification programs for paying people's mortgages. By the way, I have this wonderful bumper sticker on my car that says, "Honk if I paid your mortgage," and people are honking at me all the time when I'm going down the street. You add up all of these things, and it turns out that all of these interventions have cost U.S. taxpayers and our children and grandchildren's children about $2 trillion. And that is a massive amount of money. And we really have to ask ourselves, because this has been a big experiment in whether government can create jobs. And we have to ask ourselves, nearly 2 years later, has this worked? Has it really made spending down if we're going to remain a prosperous country?
Chris, you've been inside, and
we are trying to do so many things. You try to make sure that there are more people pushing the cart, pulling the cart than are in the cart, and we're seeing too many people in the cart.
Now, with Kraft, let's go through the 5 big topics that our panelists are going to look at. And you see them up on the screen now. Jobs and the business climate. We'll march through these. Taxes, Wall Street, housing, and overall size of government. Now, it's not important that we get through all of these. We're just going to try this new approach to see if this actually works to find common ground. And if it does, then we can do another session and take the show on the road. If you just take the first one, jobs and the business climate, we asked Mark Trumbull, who is an economics writer for the Christian Science Monitor, whom some of you know, to help us fill in what we think are the minimal and the maximum positions. We can work on the wording, and in fact, I'd invite our panelists to examine that. But for instance, when it comes to jobs, the minimal position is get government out of the way. The maximum position is you need a lot of federal support because you need to stimulate the economy when you have a big problem such as the Great Recession we've been through. So that's an example from jobs.
New social programs, and just one example of that would be the health care bill, which I think was one of the the biggest mistakes we've made in Washington in a long time, and that's saying a lot.
I would agree that it's important for government to be minimalist and step out of the way and allow the private sector to work. I think that's served us quite well in our 250-year-plus history. I do think there are times when the market isn't working properly or well, when we're panicked. And I just invite you to think back 2 years ago and the environment in that period, and think about Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Merrill Lynch, Wachovia, AIG. Goldman Sachs had to turn itself into a bank holding company because it was fearful that it would fail. It was a very dark period, and there was panic. Proper time to engage in that kind of very epic kind of debate. But when you take it all together, I think the response was very, very successful. We had not responded the way we did. And my view is firmly, yes, measurably higher. We would have had a measurably worse economy, and it would have cost taxpayers more. That it wouldn't have cost. It's not. I don't think it's $2 trillion. By my math, it's going to come out to be about $1.4 trillion in the policy response. It would have been measurably greater to taxpayers.
So I don't know whether this is common ground or not. And Kraft, you help guide us on this. I mean, in extraordinary circumstances, is that when government should be involved in the economy in helping to create these safety nets? And is there any way that government can do that without and then back out, or is government always, when it intervenes in these extraordinary circumstances, going to be staying in the economy in a big way and therefore growing?
And we just don't have grown-up dialogue about important things anymore. If times are good, you don't deficit spend, so that when times are bad, you don't have to spend an absolute fortune beyond comprehension.
Maybe I disagree somewhat with Chris. Remember, you all remember this. It's maybe the most important economic insight of all time. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? If the government, I don't think there are any kids in this room, so I can say this, to an adult audience. There's no tooth fairy out there, right? If the government spends $1, that dollar has to come from somewhere. No, I've been saying for 25 years, we need a flat tax in this country so we can be competitive. And I've always said, we're only going to get that flat tax when we have a financial crisis and people realize we've got to change.
So what do you think the common ground is on this?
It's everything except a couple hundred billion on...
We agree on the bank.
The bank.
Yes. We essentially agree that I don't want to put your words in your mouth, that the federal government has to maintain the sanctity and the soundness of the financial system. And we were, again, I don't want to put your words in your mouth, but that was when we had, you all remember the whole debate about the $700 billion. Even that process, I didn't like the process very much. We just wrote a $700 billion check and
but that worked.
That worked. It worked.
You needed the big number to make it work, to instill confidence.
Well, I want to toss out an idea that we might be able to all agree on. I don't like government spending generally, but I do like good roads. I do like clean air. I do like infrastructure. I think, and I mentioned this to Robert Reich once on the air, we ought to let's build more infrastructure, but let's get rid of these regulations. Let's say you have to have, union workers and so on these things. You can build much more of this stuff. You can have many more companies compete to do these projects. I've talked to a lot of small businessmen and say, the problem with the infrastructure spending, I couldn't, because I don't have a union workforce, I couldn't bid on these projects.
But Steve, would you have said no increase in unemployment insurance? What about
definitely not?
What about food stamps?
Well, this is an important point, actually. Unemployment insurance is a humanitarian policy. It is not an economic stimulus.
But we do it in every recession. We do it.
Right. Because
is that wrong? You would not do that in the next recession?
Again, I'm saying as a humanitarian policy, I might.
Sort of, we got to run taxes now.
Well, look, here's my view very simply. I don't like tinkering with the tax code every year. I think we've got to have a world-class tax system to compete in these global markets. Mark travels all over the world. I'm not a global traveler like you are. You said you've been in Asia and Europe and so on. We've got to get serious in this country about competitiveness. And you can call it a flat tax, you can call it what you want, but a system that rewards capital investment here, doesn't double tax, saving and investment, has a low rate, so we're not the highest rate country in the world. We're one of the lowest rate countries. I like your idea of taxing people more on their consumption rather than their savings. We've got to move in that direction if we're going to beat these other countries that we're competing against, because lower the rates and broaden the base. Yeah. You know, and that's, you know, that means, I saw the article today in the Journal, they're talking about maybe taking away the mortgage deduction or this deduction. Yeah. I'm all for that. Yeah. You know, I mean, the lower the rates, the less the deductions are worth. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, it's got to be simple and efficient, and the lower the tax rate and the broader the base, the better off we're going to be.
And that's free up legislators from a pledge that says no new taxes, and have them say we will try to lower the overall rate level of taxation, but allow your legislators to have a debate among themselves and then a debate with all of you.
Well, I think the TARP, the bank bailout aspect of TARP, was a slam dunk success. I mean, we made money on the deal, and we saved the banking system and the economy to boot. So I think that was a great success, and I think picking the $700 billion number was important, I think, for sending a strong signal that the government was going to do whatever it took to save the banking system, and by so doing, it established a modicum level of confidence in the system worked. Played a role, they certainly did, but their role was minor in the context of the broader financial crisis.
I do not know how anyone can say that Fannie and Freddie were minor. They were 3/4 of the housing market, and in my judgment, they were right in the center of this.
No, it's wrong. You're wrong. Let me give you a statistic.
We may not get common ground.
Let me give you no common ground.
Let's at least document what it is.
They didn't play a role. I do think they played a role, but it was a bit part. I think we're going to agree. I think there should be no Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't think we need them. I do think, though, we need government in our mortgage market. We need the government to provide catastrophic insurance if the mortgage market fails, and price it explicitly, not implicitly, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were implicitly pricing it. But we need government backing of our mortgage market so that we can have affordable mortgage lending to our population, but not Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
So going forward, what is the role of government in dealing with this?
Get jobs, get people in jobs. I mean, look, we got to get the economy growing. If the economy starts growing and we get jobs back, people can pay their mortgages. We're in this kind of death spiral right now where, you know, you've got high unemployment. If a person loses their job, they can't pay their mortgage. That reduces home values. So I hate to say this, but I think it all circles back to what are we doing as an economic growth job strategy to get Americans back to work, to have high-income jobs in this country so people can afford expensive homes.
Is there anything government can do when we talk about some of the subtext here, when we're listening to the subtext, a lot of it has to do with reinstilling confidence in Americans, whether it's businesses to hire people, whether it's homeowners to feel as though they can take, or people who can take on risk by buying up some of these cheap properties. Is there anything government can properly do, or is that too inchoate?
If McDonald's spent all of their money telling you why you shouldn't buy Burger King, and Burger King spent all of its money telling you why you shouldn't buy McDonald's, both companies would go out of business. And that's what legislators and candidates are doing to each other. Mm-hmm. And so there's no faith in your legislators. And I have to tell you, the guy who beat me is a hardworking guy. He's got 2 kids, and he's given up a lot. And they're good people. You may disagree with them, but they're honorable people. But you would be hard pressed to know that anybody is honorable in that.
I feel bad. I do feel bad. I told Chris he was wrong, and I shouldn't have said that.
No. Can I say that? I
just got a little carried away. You know, I'm an economist. I'm not a politician.
I was thinking this was. I was thinking it was getting pretty boring. Did you agree on that?
No common ground to start from, and we're falling apart. You'll say